Well, hello. My name is Angel Wood, and this is Crime of the Truest Kind. Well, we turned the big 5-0. Episode number 50. What a milestone. I feel triumphant. Thank you all who have stuck with me, and welcome anybody who's new to the podcast. My name is Angel Wood. This is Crime of the Truest Kind. It is a true crime, local history, and storytelling podcast. I write about crimes, I set the scene, I connect story themes, and I talk about the things that happened here in Massachusetts and New England. This episode is about sexuality, consent, sexual violence, murder, and defending a loved one's privacy in death. Please listen with care. I have Patreon patrons to thank and some brand new supporters. Episode number 50, Lizzi Marriott, A Life So Bright, Dover, New Hampshire. Elizabeth Marriott would have celebrated her 30th birthday on June 10th of this year. She will be forever 19. Returned to the earth and sea that she loved so much. Growing up in Westborough, Massachusetts, she went to Westborough High School, class of 2011. She was the prom queen, but she doesn't come off at all like a tropey movie prom queen. And Westborough is a small town in Worcester County of about 21,500 in 2022. It is central Massachusetts. 11 miles from Worcester and 35 miles from Boston, the two largest cities in the Commonwealth. I realized that I was in Westborough very recently when I brought my puppy, Poppy, to Tufts Veterinary School in Grafton. It is beautiful. I remember remarking to myself out loud in my car that Westborough was pretty nice. I do remember that the now defunct rock station that we grew up listening to was licensed in Westborough. WAAF, the only station that really rocks, yeah, you know. Westborough, Worcester, and then Westborough, Boston, when they didn't want to be called a Worcester station anymore. Radio wars were dumb. And WAAF was deep into it. Warring DJs, the whole bit. But WAAF was sold to a Christian broadcasting company. The irony, seeing as the kind of rock and roll that was played on WAAF was what parents used to call devil's music. Well, my parents did. I am willing to bet the first time I ever heard Pantera was on AAF. There's nobody to bet with, but WAAF went off the air in February of 2020 when the owners, Entercom, they now call themselves Odyssey, sold the station to Educational Media Foundation, EMF, for $10.7 million. If you put on 107.3 today, you will hear K-Love, whose mission is this: to create compelling media that inspires and encourages you to have a meaningful relationship with Christ. And anyone who works there should also align with this philosophy. I know that because I spoke to someone about working there. It was not for me. It was a final twist of the knife after both WBCN and WFNX went away years earlier. R.I.P. rock radio. There are other rock stations in the Boston area, but radio is nothing like it was then. And I love the messages I get from lots of you who tell me you used to listen to me on WFNX or WBCN or WZLX. I sure did love radio. It was really fun then. Lizzi Marriott set her sights on becoming a marine biologist. She had a special love for the ocean and all of its creatures. Her college essay was about her desire to protect marine life. It was a passion that was sparked during a week-long marine biology camp in 9th grade. Lizzi spent her freshman year at Manchester Community College in Manchester. Her uncle taught welding there. I drove by that not too long ago. I realized it used to be one of the New Hampshire technical colleges. They have since changed them into community colleges: Concord, Manchester, Nashua, so on. I can tie a bizarre story to this. I usually can. Once upon a time, I took some college courses at the Nashua Votech College. Okay, I'm not sure that's at all the proper name. But in a very strange turn of events, and I don't know why Nashua, New Hampshire was on his radar, Christian Brando, son of Academy Award-winning actor Marlon Brando, and a man implicated in a few of his own true crime tales, attended school there upon his release from prison. Christian Brando was convicted of shooting Dag Drolet, his half-sister Cheyenne's boyfriend, in their father's Mulholland Drive home in the Hollywood Hills. Beautiful place to drive if you've never been there. And there are many more details than I care to get into today, but Christian Brando pled guilty to manslaughter and went to prison in 1991. He was released in 1996 and permitted to attend school in New Hampshire. I'd love to hear from anyone who has a Christian Brando experience. Christian Brando's name is also part of the Bonnie Lee Bakley murder case. She was married to the actor Robert Blake when she was shot to death in their car in Santa Monica, California in 2001. Christian Brando's connection was that he was told he was the father of Bakley's infant daughter. It is a sordid tale, and Robert Blake was charged and acquitted of Bonnie's murder. Oh, and yes, the infant daughter was biologically Robert Blake's child. One last true crime connection with Christian Brando. Christian Brando was represented by Robert Shapiro, who would go on to join what is referred to as the O.J. Simpson Dream Team, a sort of cadre of high-powered attorneys, which also included one Robert Kardashian, and father to the famed Kim, Courtney, and Khloe, none of whom I plan to ever mention again on this podcast. Lizzi was passionate about a future in the field of marine science. Her love flourished as a volunteer at the New England Aquarium in Boston. She could often be found saving wildlife, whether it be a frog or a turtle. She loved everything about it. The University of New Hampshire in Durham was Lizzi's dream school, so it was no surprise that she was ecstatic when she was accepted into the marine biology program, which is now called UNH School of Marine Science and Ocean Engineering. Pretty incredible program I'm looking at right now, marine.unh.edu. She began her sophomore year in the fall of 2012 as a commuter student. She didn't live on campus. Instead, she lived in Chester, New Hampshire, about 30 minutes away, with her aunt and uncle, Tony and Becky Hanna, who were, as they called themselves, Lizzi's New Hampshire parents. They loved having Lizzi in their home. She brought a special kind of energy. She was going to school full-time, working part-time at Target in Greenland, New Hampshire. She was friendly. She was spirited. She injected a special kind of childlike excitement into everything she did, even her uncle's welding lessons. Lizzi faced everything with a youthful positivity. It was one of her most coveted attributes. It's something in my house we call adorable, and something her family misses quite a lot. Tuesday, October 9th, 2012, started out pretty ordinarily for Lizzi. She was a few weeks into her first year at UNH, loving her studies in marine science. She was working, making new friends. She told her aunt and uncle she'd be going out after class that night and planned to be home no later than 12:30 at the latest. Lizzi went to her chemistry lab until 9 o'clock. At 8:55 p.m., she sent a text saying she was going to visit a friend, someone she met at her retail job. Lizzi had recently made friends with an 18-year-old woman who also worked at Target. Her name was Catherine McDonough, who went by the nickname Cat. The two traded text messages, made a plan to meet at her Dover apartment to watch a movie. To drive from the UNH campus in Durham to 1 Mill Street in Dover is about 12 minutes. Wednesday morning rolled around, and Lizzi hadn't made it back to Chester. Her aunt and uncle, Tony and Becky, tried to just play it off as, she's a teenager. She met a new friend. She stayed up too late. She just crashed on their couch. We sure do wish that's all it was. By Thursday, and still no sign of Lizzi, her family knew something was very wrong. Lizzi's parents called the Hannas asking if they had heard from her. No one had. It was panic-inducing. And since the Marriots live more than an hour away in Massachusetts, they immediately reported her missing. Another realization hit the family. They had no idea who she was going to visit on Tuesday night. Investigators got an early break when friends told them Lizzi had planned to meet a coworker from Target named Kat. In a separate text exchange about a lunch plan the next day, Lizzi had told another work friend named Nate McNeil of her plans to meet Kat in Dover. Investigators were also able to determine that the last ping from Lizzi's phone was picked up at 10:10 p.m. in Dover. Now, like many modern-day crimes, we have a digital footprint of our lives to aid police in an investigation. Lizzi's phone left breadcrumbs right to Kat McDonough's apartment door. Number 341, Sawyer Mill Apartments, Mill Street, Dover, New Hampshire. Lizzi's last sent message said she was going to Kat's. Lizzi's disappearance triggered a rapid response, and a full-scale search effort began in the Seacoast region. That includes the port city of Portsmouth, the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, where, I learned, they overhaul, repair, and modernize the U.S. Navy's nuclear-powered attack submarine fleet. That sounds incredibly serious and fascinating. It sits along the Piscataqua River that empties into the Gulf of Maine at Portsmouth Harbor. It is an active shipping area with several million tons of cargo entering each year. The mighty Piscataqua separates New Hampshire from the state of Maine, and I look forward to the view every time we drive over the Piscataqua River Bridge headed to Maine. You get a full view of the entire region. And Scissor Fight named an EP after it, featuring such hits as Out Motherfucker the Man, There's Drink, Fight, and Fuck, written by New Hampshire's favorite son, G.G. Allen, and a personal favorite, their cover of Aerosmith's Lickin' a Promise. Very sorry, I did not intend on this episode to be so vulgar. I give you my word that I will wash my mouth out with soap as soon as I am through. I do really, really like Scissor Fight, and their songs are really, really dirty. And they were originally based in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, so can't talk about New Hampshire and not talk about Scissor Fight. Investigators focused on Kat McDonough, and the person they learned was her live-in boyfriend, a much older man by the name of Seth Mazelia, himself a UNH alum, who graduated in 2006 with a degree in theater. He grew up in Portsmouth, practiced karate, and taught at a studio over the bridge in Kittery, Maine. He was a certified EMT, that is, an emergency medical technician. He had training from the New Hampshire Bureau of Emergency Medical Services. He was also working at Best Buy in Newington. Kat McDonough was an honor student pursuing acting in local theater. She was 18, he was 29. You know what I call that, right? That, my friends, is a motherfucking red flag. The two met during a Portsmouth stage production called Last Rites. They had performed together in July of 2011. Now, it would be easy to deduce that Kat was 17 years old, a Portsmouth High School student, when Seth Mazelia began to pursue her. Kat would drop out of school and leave her family to move into a one-room studio apartment with Mazelia in Dover. We will come back to that. Stay with me. When word began to spread that Lizzi was missing, Kat told friends who knew them both that Lizzi never showed up at her place on Tuesday night. Police interviews with the two began just days after Lizzi disappeared and painted a chaotic picture. Court records said that at first, Mazelia also said Lizzi had not made it to their apartment that night, that he had gone for a run, hurt his ankle, and was slow in getting back home. McDonough told the story of taking her digital camera to the cemetery to see if she could capture images of ghosts. McDonough didn't offer much more than that at the time. But over the course of the many hours of interrogation, Mazelia's story would shift. He began to talk about what happened in the apartment that night, the night that Lizzi died. The circumstances of Lizzi's death are dark. Lurid is the label some reports gave it. Accurate. It titillated the public. I read a few letters to the editor chastising newspapers for their front page coverage of filth, I will call it. It's exactly what sold papers, I'm afraid. not unlike the Greg Smart murder case, where it was full of salacious details of adult-age school employees doing sex with high school kids. Here comes talk of sex practices. I'm going to say if you're not into the suggestion of this sort of thing, or don't want to have to explain to your kids in the car what certain terms mean, you should rethink this section. More importantly, though, this podcast is never for kids. A picture began to emerge of Mazelia and McDonough's relationship. The two were, as authorities would describe them, bondage enthusiasts who visited fetish websites using names like Enigmatic Shadows and Rogue Temptress. Police affidavits describe the text messages Mazelia sent to McDonough in August, before Lizzie went missing. It had some racy stuff about BDSM, a term used to describe sex practices that involve dominance, submission, and control. Now, the practice typically involves one partner being dominant, while the other is submissive during sex. The term stands for bondage, domination, sadomasochism. Sex practices like tying and being tied up and toys are some people's thing. Polyamory is pretty widely practiced as well. I don't sex shame. You do you, or whoever. But when it comes to the subject of consent, well, then we've got something to talk about. And as is always the case, the media goes shithouse on this stuff. Reporters will do a little Google searching, maybe go on a subreddit, and then they're sexperts on kinks and fetishes and alternative lifestyles, like the Boston Phoenix Classified. Mazelia, though, expanded that idea and requested McDonough pick a friend to offer him. Yes. Investigators began to piece together that Lizzi Marriott was that offering. It's not clear whether Kat befriended Lizzie with the intention of luring her home, or if it was an idea that came up after her friendship was developing. Whatever the case, she created a ruse to get Lizzie to their apartment that night. The crassness in reporting this case was underscored with lines like this from the Boston Globe. Catherine McDonough was the teenage sex slave of Mazelia, a 30-year-old she met in community theater who ordered her to recruit candidates to join them in sexual encounters. I don't think that statement is untrue. And once Mazelia started talking to police, he did not stop, apparently. Now, based on the very little I know about his personality, that sounds on brand. He was a performer, wasn't he? As the interview wore on, he talked of bondage, sadomasochism. In one story, he said Kat and another couple had hurt Lizzie, and that he arrived home to find Lizzie with marks around her neck. Over the course of an 11-hour interview, Mazelia would admit his involvement, how he got Lizzie to play strip poker with them. That moved to graphic sex talk about getting tied up. That led to consensual sex involving autoerotic asphyxiation. And one of his many claims was that during this act, there was some rough play. Kat got involved. He was tightening a rope around Lizzie's neck, and that she had a seizure. It is worth noting here that I found no information as to whether Lizzie had a seizure disorder of any kind, so we can rule all of that out. There's more. In time, Kat McDonough would come up with some stories of her own. In one interview, she said they had engaged in a sex act, and that is how Lizzie died, by accident. She brought up the sex position called queening, where she had been face-sitting for a period of 10 or so minutes, and Lizzie suffocated. It's lies. Neither of them tried to help Lizzie. No one called for help. No one attempted any life-saving measures. Remember, he was a trained emergency medical technician. Instead, Mazelia wrapped Lizzie's face with a plastic grocery bag and tied it around her neck. And Kat McDonough, she seemed to snap to it and started a cover-up, sending a text to Lizzie's phone that read, "Hey, darling, expected you at 10, passed out, lost track of time, still coming?" Lizzie was already lying on the floor unconscious. The police affidavit describes interviews with another couple McDonough called that night, a woman named Roberta Gherkin, a friend of Mazelia, whom he told her to call. Gherkin said McDonough sounded shaken. The call came in at 10:49 p.m. with the request to come over to help them with a problem. Gherkin and her boyfriend, Paul Hickok, went to the apartment because Gherkin believed they needed her assistance. They were known to call on Gherkin to help in situations where McDonough's family confronted them about their teenage daughter coming back home. Kat McDonough's family was deeply troubled by what had become of her and her relationship with this guy more than 10 years older. Kat McDonough's parents believed all along that Seth Mazelia manipulated her and prevented her from contacting them over a number of months before Lizzie's murder. When Gherkin and Hickok came into the apartment, they saw a white female lying on the floor next to the futon the couple used as a bed. She was wearing blue underwear and a grocery bag tied over her head. Gherkin used a box cutter she carried to open the bag and saw a woman's discolored face. Definite signs of trauma. Mazelia, who was sitting on the futon next to Lizzie's body, told Gherkin he had blacked out and her body was already on the floor with the bag when he came to. And he kept saying within hearing distance of Paul Hickok that he had, quote, gone too far. Gherkin would later testify that Mazelia was a volatile and controlling person with multiple personalities. They had met at a Halloween event in 2011. She, a tarot card reader, he was an actor. She knew him as Lex. They had a very brief sexual relationship that consisted of, according to her testimony, intimate relations of the oral kind. Something she did or he would, quote, short circuit. I find that information disturbing, reprehensibly controlling behavior. And her testimony helped to establish his character, no doubt. Was he a narcissist? He does appear to have a high sense of his own importance, especially when it comes to sex. What we learn about his actions that night? Well, I used it once, but I will use it again since it illustrates the nature of his actions. Reprehensible. Lizzie died unnaturally. No one called police or EMS. What happened that night, Lizzie's last, was grim. Earmuff it for me. That's the classic line from Old School when Vince Vaughn is about to say something terrible. Lizzie did play strip poker, but that wasn't enough for Mazelia. He wanted to manipulate the situation further, pushing Lizzie to kiss Kat. Lizzie said no, that she was with someone. Lizzie did have a girlfriend named Brittany at the time. Mazelia then wanted Lizzie to watch him and McDonough have sex. When she said no again, it made him angry. Murderous. McDonough's role was simply to follow his lead. They said as much in a text exchange that night. By this time in Kat McDonough's life, she had lost all agency. She existed just to serve him. While the three were watching a movie, Lizzie and Kat on the floor, Mazelia on the futon, he put on a pair of leather gloves and from behind pulled a rope around Lizzie's neck. He overpowered her. She was incapacitated with no means to consent to what was happening to her. Mazelia raped her, degrading her as he did it. This is what Kat McDonough testified to in court, that she watched him do all of this. It was also part of her testimony that he was obsessive about finding another woman for sex. He demanded McDonough solicit women on related sex sites. And because she had not found an understudy, he was left without a sex partner to dominate for 12 days while Kat McDonough was away at a theater camp that August. And as a result of leaving him alone, she was subjected to punishment during sex. Hit, pinched, hair pulled, and then he ordered her to get him another woman. He was ragey, not being able to take it out on a woman while she was away. You mad? I am being facetious, but remember what Roberta Gherkin testified to. She needed to take care of him so he would not short circuit. That is fucked up, not normal, and controlling behavior. I don't know what he is, whether he was ever evaluated by mental health professionals, but that sure sounds like psychopathic behavior. According to a piece in Psychology Today by Dr. Seth Meyers, I know, other people can have that name too, Primary psychopathy is characterized by hostility, extroversion, impulsivity, aggression, anxiety, and self-confidence. This guy was nothing if not full of himself. May we all go through life with the self-confidence of a mediocre white guy like this one. Colossal piece of garbage. It's very immature of me to say this, but he's also a dog face. And I just realized that I insulted dogs everywhere. It is difficult to hear what Lizzi went through. And I suppose my defense is to call the person who did this to her bad things. And I am not a perfect person, and he is a rapist and a murderer. He is abusive and continued to hurt her family. His actions have nothing to do with the practice of alternate lifestyles like this. Those kinds of sex practices are built on the tenets of communication and consent. We've all heard the term safe word before, right? I have a confession to make. I never read or watched the movie 50 Shades of Grey. I will be right back. Please support crime of the truest kind, and there are a number of ways to do so. Listen to the show. Tell your friends about it. Share it on social media. Leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Go to the merch store. Buy some merch. Drop a tip in the jar. Give the dogs a bone. Really, my dogs are obsessed. Become a patron on Patreon with 4 tiers starting at just $1. All links at crimeofthetruestkind.com. Kat McDonough made a deal with the prosecutors to testify against Seth Mazelia for a lighter sentence. A very light one. I'll get to that. Between the police affidavit and Kat McDonough's 10 days of testimony, the world learned about her blind dedication to her controlling older boyfriend, her active participation in a dom sub-life, how he would punish her and make demands, how she checked Lizzi's pulse to see if she was alive before Mazelia assaulted and demeaned her, and how they ultimately would rid themselves of Lizzi's presence after they ended her life, how they shoved Lizzi's body into a suitcase, loaded it into her 2001 Mazda Tribute, and drove to Pierce Island, taking only back roads from Dover to Portsmouth as a way to evade detection. They walked a footpath along the river near the shipyard, a place called the Grotto. It was concrete with a black metal fence. They had such little care for her or what they had done. They dragged her down the path and threw her off a cliff. Things didn't go as they had hoped, though. Lizzi did not disappear into the flowing river. She fell onto the rocks below, exposed by the low tide. So it became Kat McDonough's duty to scale down the cliff and pull Lizzi's body into the water. She testified about how she dragged her body deeper into the river and concealed her with seaweed. She also spoke of making a comment about Davy Jones's locker, a reference to burial at sea, the final resting place of seafarers and sailors who went to a watery grave. That could be going down with the ship, drowning, or walking the plank. It's generally considered a sailor's superstition, but its origins unknown. I have to wonder if that was a terrible attempt at some sort of reverence and solemnity. After discarding Lizzi into the river, this dim-witted duo drove around in her car, tossing evidence. They got rid of Lizzi's phone, the suitcase, a tarp they had wrapped her up in. They left Lizzi's car in the lot to make it look like she never left that night. Now without a car, they had to walk back to Dover and get rid of more evidence. That would go in dumpsters in their apartment complex. There were a number of things investigators would find in those dumpsters that were associated with apartment 341. Lizzi's sweatshirt, a used condom, a condom wrapper, gloves. They also found a pair of black men's underwear, which had DNA of Mazelia and of Lizzi. Prosecutors would say that this DNA supported their case for rape. And black gloves, well, that might be premeditation. And they were still looking for Lizzi. They dragged Lizzi into the Piscataqua River. Its very name means rapid waters. Swift currents make Portsmouth Harbor one of the fastest flowing commercial port waterways in the Northeast. This complicated the search for her. Police did begin to look for her once the missing person report came in that Thursday. And once Mazelia was questioned, the search area grew. By the end of October, the New Hampshire Marine Patrol search expanded to other sections, moving to the waters around Fox Point in Newington, upriver in tidal waters northwest of Pierce Island. Mazelia was arrested on October 13th, a day after he was interviewed, and after police found evidence in the dumpsters near their Dover apartment. Kat McDonough was arrested on December 24th, more than 2 months after Lizzie was killed. Merry Christmas. She was charged with conspiracy and hindering prosecution. She was released on $35,000 bond on the condition that she go back and live with her parents in Portsmouth. Police needed the testimony of Kat McDonough. This was a no-body case, very difficult to prosecute. I spoke of a few no-body cases in the Anna Walsh episode 39, from February of this year. Anna Walsh remains missing. It is believed her husband killed her and disseminated her remains in dumpsters around the North Shore of Massachusetts. More will be revealed when it goes to trial. It is a very sad story. A no-body case opens the door for prosecutors to greater explore the character of the victim, illustrating, for example, how they would not voluntarily leave their children, their spouses, their family, a career behind. In the case of Lizzi Marriott's murder, Kat McDonough was the key witness to connect Seth Mazelia to Lizzie's disappearance and murder. But she's also the person who lured her there. Lizzi Marriott's family never believed she was killed during the act of consensual sex. Reports about Lizzie's trusting nature bothered me when family members would describe her as gullible, someone who easily could be taken advantage of. A childhood friend called her naive. Now, of course, I didn't know Lizzie, but she did nothing wrong. She met a new friend. She found her interesting. Lizzie's girlfriend Brittany testified that it was good that Lizzie met someone like her. While Lizzie and Brittany were exclusive at the time of her death, she also described Lizzie as someone who was open to new experiences and who was excited about having made a new friend who, like herself, was bisexual. It sounds like Lizzie knew what she wanted and what she didn't want. And if anything, Kat McDonough was too friendly and possibly too trusting. She had bad intentions, was highly influenced by her romantic partner, and was motivated to get Lizzie to that apartment. Is it possible she felt trapped and had no choice? Yes. I most certainly recognize coercive abuse. The man who killed Lizzi Marriott, and I don't even like that I said his name as many times as I have in this episode. He was convicted of first-degree murder, conspiracy to falsify physical evidence, and conspiracy to commit tampering of witnesses. He got life with no chance of parole. One of my hopes for the Marriotts is that they never have to face him again. Kat McDonough was charged with hindering prosecution, conspiracy, and witness tampering. For her testimony, she was sentenced to 3.5 to 7 years, with 2 years suspended on the minimum and 4 years suspended on the maximum. She was also given 2 3.5 to 7 year suspended sentences. Her 2014 request for parole after only 1 year in prison was denied, but 2 years later, in July 2016, the star witness was released from the New Hampshire Prison for Women in Goffstown after serving a maximum 3-year sentence. Let me say that again. Kat McDonough served just 3 years for her involvement in the murder of Lizzi Marriott. While Kat's testimony put Lizzie's murderer away for life, Kat is the reason why Lizzie was murdered. I absolutely believe she has huge culpability, and I know her family believes that too. As of July 2016, she was no longer under the jurisdiction of the New Hampshire Department of Corrections and is free to move on with her life. Free to move on with her life. I wonder how free the Marriott family feels about moving on with their life. When she got out, she went back home to Portsmouth. Where she is today, I do not know. I would imagine she wants to keep a very low profile. Earlier in 2016, attorneys for Mazelia filed to appeal his conviction, claiming the trial court made a mistake by excluding evidence concerning the victim, Elizabeth Marriott. Mazelia's attorneys argued that Marriot's sexual history was necessary to their appeal. The New Hampshire Supreme Court ruled that the information, which had been sealed during the criminal trial, could be made public during Mazelia's hearing. But the state's attorney general then filed a stay, asking to make arguments about why the information should be released or remain private in front of the court. The defense maintained that the jury during the 19-day trial should have heard undisclosed information about Lizzi Marriott. What the defense team was after was information about Lizzie's sexual history and whether she ever voiced interest in any kind of non-traditional sex practices. Releasing a sexual assault victim's private information violates the established rape shield laws and New Hampshire's Victim Bill of Rights, which protects sexual assault victims by ensuring that irrelevant information about a victim's sexual past or private information is not admitted in court and shared in public. Lizzie's parents were forced to make a plea to the public to respect their daughter's privacy and not continue to victimize them by sharing the information from the documents should they be unsealed. In doing so, the Marriott family was also speaking up for the privacy rights of all victims of violent crime. Find more information at the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, nhcadsv.org. And of course, I will link it at crimeofthetruestkind.com in the show notes. The defense clearly wanted to mischaracterize her sexuality and to victim blame. Whether Lizzie had certain sex practices or not, it's irrelevant given what happened to her at the hands of Mazelia and McDonough. Lizzie was incapacitated and assaulted. She did not consent. Finally, in December of 2016, the New Hampshire State Supreme Court rejected Mazelia's appeal, denying him a new trial and a chance to introduce evidence of Lizzie's private sexual information. Lizzie's private matters remain private. It has been 11 years since Lizzie was murdered. Her family has been forced to live only with what could have been. As a way to celebrate who she was, the family established the Lizzi Marriott Intrepid Explorer Fund, named for an essay she wrote for UNH about her passions for marine science. She set her sights on becoming a prominent figure protecting our oceans. And until then, she would be content being an intrepid explorer. It is a scholarship fund for young adults like Lizzie who want to dedicate their time and energy working in marine sciences. Preference is given to Westborough High School graduates, volunteers at the New England Aquarium, and University of New Hampshire students studying marine sciences. Please visit rememberinglizzie.org, and Lizzie is Lizzi. Lizzie's dad said something during his impact statement. The devil will appear as a friend. That really did stick with me. Lizzie's remains have never been recovered. Her family has had no opportunity for a funeral ceremony or a traditional burial. There are no cremains to keep on the mantle of their only daughter. Lizzie has no grave marker to go to mourn or leave flowers. I don't know if her family could possibly share in this comfort, but knowing how much she loved the ocean and all of its creatures, that she was returned to the sea like a seafarer of kindness, the eternally intrepid explorer. Thank you for listening. Do something today that brings you joy. Take a walk in the sun. Hug a dog. Have a piece of your favorite candy. I just destroyed a Hershey Dark Bar. Follow Crime of the Truest Kind at Crime of the Truest Kind Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X, whatever it's called, Threads, Blue Sky. Anyone on Blue Sky? YouTube, the TikTok. And I do hope to see you on November 9th at Off Cabot in Beverly, Massachusetts for Operation True Crime and Wine. It is a play on a classic rock record. Extra points if you guess what I'm talking about. There will be wine. We're doing a wine tasting. There will be beverages. There will be mocktails. There will be true crime trivia to break the ice. A live case discussion is happening. I have 2 guests who will join me. I will announce them next week. All I'm waiting for is their biography information, so I know how they would like to be presented. Thank you to my Patreon patrons. You are wonderful. Brand new solid gold Devin M. from New Hampshire. Superstars, executive producers Lisa McColgan, Rhiannon. Solid gold Pam K, Deborah. Wicked cool Brandy, Devil Dog, Rebecca, Mark, Dominique. Thank you, new followers. Thank you, Michelle, for dropping that tip in the jar. Amazingly generous of you. Patreon monthly minis are coming and more live crime nights. Tell me where you are and we'll make a plan. Oh, and of course, email your show ideas. crimeofthetruestkind@gmail.com. You've been sending some really great ones. Thank you very much. I think that's all I've got. All right, lock your goddamn doors.